They called Table 9 the vault, not because the food was bad, but because the man who sat there decided who lived and who died in this city. Every Tuesday at 8:00 p.m., the music stopped, the kitchen went silent, and the staff at Anna's Giovanni's held their breath. Nobody dared to make eye contact with the Salvatore Romano. Nobody except her. They thought she was just a waitress with a death wish. They were wrong. She was the match that would burn his empire to the ground and build something entirely new from the ashes. This isn't a fairy tale. This is how Aria Bennett broke the devil. The rain in Brooklyn didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Inside Giovanni's, the finest Italian restaurant on the waterfront, the atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. It was 7:55 p.m. on a Tuesday. The dining room was bustling with lawyers, politicians, and the occasional lost tourist, but a distinct hush was spreading from the front door like a contagion. Aria Bennett adjusted her apron, her hands red and chapped from the sanitizer. She was 24, with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide, and a ponytail that had been retained 3 times since her shift started. She wasn't looking for trouble. She was looking for rent money. "Aria, you're up." The floor manager, a sweating, balding man named Marco, hissed at her. He was wiping his forehead with a napkin, his face pale. "Table 9. Aria paused, balancing a tray of dirty martini glasses. "I took table 9 last week. Marco, it's Rick's turn." "Rick is in the bathroom throwing up," Marco whispered, his eyes darting toward the heavy oak doors at the entrance. "He can't do it. You're the only one who doesn't shake when you pour the water." "Please, Aria, I'll cut you in on the service charge. Double share." Aria looked at table 9. It was the best seat in the house. A semicircular leather booth tucked into a private alcove offering a view of the entire room while shielding the occupants from the window. It was currently empty, set with impeccable precision. "Fine," Aria sighed. "But if he doesn't like the risotto tonight, that's on the chef, not me." At 8:00 p.m. sharp, the heavy doors swung open. 2 men entered first, massive, wearing suits that struggled to contain their bulk. They scanned the room with dead, shark-like eyes. Then came the man himself. Salvatore Romano wasn't what people expected when they thought of a Mafia Don. He didn't look like the caricatures on TV. He was in his late 30s, tall, lean, and dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than Aria made in a year. His face was sharp, angular, and shaved close, with eyes the color of cold espresso. He didn't walk with swagger. He moved with the terrifying, silent grace of a predator that knew it had no natural enemies. The restaurant went quiet. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Conversations died. Salvatore moved to table 9, his 2 guards taking up positions at the bar, watching the room's reflection in the mirror. Aria took a deep breath, picked up the water pitcher, and walked into the lion's den. She approached the table just as Salvatore was unfolding his napkin. He didn't look up. He never looked up at the staff. To him they were furniture. "Good evening, Mr. Romano," Aria said, her voice flat and steady, sparkling or still. Salvatore paused. His hand froze on the napkin. He slowly raised his head. Most servers trembled. Some stuttered. Last month, a waiter had dropped a fork and nearly fainted from panic. But this voice was bored, tired. He looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the frayed collar of her uniform, the scar on her chin, and the defiant set of her jaw. "Still," he said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated through the table. "No ice. We're out of the Pellegrino," Aria lied smoothly. She wasn't, but the bottles were in the back storage, and she didn't want to haul a crate. "I can bring you the Aquapanna, or you can wait 10 minutes for me to go to the cellar." Marco, watching from the kitchen pass, looked like he was about to have a stroke. "You didn't give Salvatore Romano options. You didn't tell him you were out of anything." Salvatore's eyes narrowed. The silence at the table stretched heavy and dangerous. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. "Aquapanna is fine," he said. Aria nodded and turned on her heel. She didn't bow. She didn't scrape. As she walked away, she felt his eyes drilling into her back. She didn't know it then, but that small lie about the water was the first crack in the wall he had built around himself. She returned with his water and a basket of bread. As she poured, Salvatore spoke, his voice low so only she could hear. "You're new." "I've been here 6 months," she corrected him, placing the glass down. "You just never looked up before." The guard by the bar took a step forward, sensing the disrespect, but Salvatore held up a hand to stop him. He picked up his glass. "What is your name?"
Aria. Just Aria.
"For the purpose of bringing you dinner."
Yes.
"Just Aria." Salvatore took a sip of water. "Well, just Aria. Don't bring me the menu, I want the osso buco, and tell Chef Marco if the veal is tough like last time. I'm going to buy this building and turn it into a parking lot." "The veal is fine," Aria said, scribbling on her pad. "But we're out of the Barolo you usually drink." Salvatore leaned back, crossing his arms. "You seem to be out of a lot of things tonight." "It's a Tuesday," she shrugged. "Delivery day is Wednesday. Do you want the Chianti or not?" For the first time in years, Salvatore Romano laughed. It was a dry, rusty sound. "Bring the Chianti." By the time the main course arrived, the tension in the restaurant had dissipated slightly. The patrons realized nobody was getting shot in the next 5 minutes, so the hum of conversation returned. Aria moved efficiently, ignoring the burning stares of her co-workers. She knew who Salvatore was. Everyone in the neighborhood knew. His family, the Romano crime syndicate, ran the unions, the docks, and half the construction projects in the Tri-State area. But Aria had bigger problems than the Mafia. Her brother Danny was in a rehab facility upstate that cost $3,000 a month, and she was 2 payments behind. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. She placed the osso buco in front of Salvatore. "Careful, plate's hot." He picked up his fork. "You aren't afraid of me, Aria?" "Should I be?" "Most people are. Most people have something to lose," she muttered, almost to herself. Salvatore paused, the knife hovering over the meat. He looked at her with a new intensity, analyzing her like a chessboard. "And you have nothing?" "I have a shift to finish and a bus to catch," she replied, pouring the wine. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The front door burst open. It wasn't the slow, heavy entrance of the Romano crew. It was frantic. 3 men in leather jackets stormed in. They weren't Italian, they were Eastern European. The Volca's brothers, a rival faction encroaching on Romano territory. The music cut out instantly. The 2 guards at the bar reached for their jackets, but the intruders already had submachine guns raised. Screams erupted from the diners. People dove under tables. Marco vanished into the kitchen. Salvatore didn't flinch. He sat perfectly still, his knife and fork in hand. One of the gunmen shouted something in Russian and pointed the weapon toward table 9. "Down!" Aria yelled. Without thinking, she didn't dive for cover. She shoved Salvatore hard in the shoulder, knocking him sideways into the leather booth, just as the glass behind him shattered into 1,000 diamonds. Rat-tat-tat. Bullets chewed up the mahogany paneling where Salvatore's head had been a second ago. The noise was deafening. Debris flew everywhere. Salvatore's guards returned fire instantly. The restaurant turned into a war zone. Aria was pressed against the floor of the booth, smelling the leather and the gun smoke. Salvatore was above her, shielding her body, a heavy silver pistol suddenly in his hand. He fired 3 shots over the edge of the booth, controlled. Precise. Bang. Bang, bang. Silence followed. "Clear," one of the Romano guards shouted. Salvatore slowly sat up. He checked the room. The 3 Russian hitmen were down. The diners were sobbing, but the threat was neutralized. He looked down at Aria. She was shaking now, the adrenaline fading, leaving only the cold shock. There was a cut on her cheek from a flying shard of glass, bleeding onto her white collar. Salvatore holstered his gun and reached out. Aria flinched, but he gently touched her chin, tilting her head to inspect the cut. His fingers were warm, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man who had just killed 3 people. "You pushed me," he said, his voice laced with disbelief. "You were just standing there." Aria breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You were just sitting there. You saved my life." I reacted. "It was a reflex." "No," Salvatore said, his eyes darkening. "People run. People hide. You stood in front of a bullet." He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, white silk, and pressed it against her bleeding cheek. "Hold this." Sirens were wailing in the distance. The NYPD was coming. This was about to become a circus. Salvatore stood and adjusted his suit jacket, shaking off the glass. He reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the table, blood-spattered risotto and all. "Marco!" Salvatore roared. The manager peeked out from the kitchen, trembling like a leaf. "Yes, Mr. Romano." "Fire her," Salvatore said coldly, pointing at Aria. Aria's eyes went wide. She scrambled to her feet, still holding the handkerchief to her face. "What, you can't? I just saved your life." "I said fire her," Salvatore repeated, not looking at Marco. He stared directly at Aria. "She is done here. If I see her working in this restaurant again, I burn it down." "Yes, sir, Mr. Romano. Immediately, sir." Marco stammered. Salvatore turned to Aria. "Get your things. Get out now." "You son of a bitch," Aria spat, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. "I need this job." "Not anymore," Salvatore said. He turned to his guards. "Let's go before the cops get the perimeter set up." Out the back. He walked away without looking back, leaving Aria standing amidst the ruin of the dining room, unemployed, bleeding, and furious. She looked down at the table. The envelope was sitting next to the bread basket. She grabbed it, intending to throw it at his retreating head, but the weight of it stopped her. She opened the flap. Cash, stacks of 100 bills, a 10 zeros, and a small cream-colored business card with a phone number and a single word handwritten in elegant cursive. "Tomorrow." The envelope burned a hole in Aria's cheap canvas tote bag. 10,000. It was more money than she had seen in her entire life. Yet it felt heavy, contaminated by the violence she had just witnessed. She didn't go home to her cramped studio apartment in Queens. Instead, she took the subway north, the rhythmic clatter of the train failing to drown out the sound of gunshots ringing in her ears. She got off at a stop surrounded by manicured lawns and high fences, and Sunrise Recovery Center. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and lemon polish. Aria walked to the front desk, ignoring the receptionist's pitying look. She pulled the envelope out. "This covers Danny's last 2 months," Aria said, her voice trembling slightly. "And the next 3 in advance." The receptionist's eyes widened as Aria counted out the crisp bills. "Aria, where did you get this?" "Tips," Aria said sharply. "Can I see him?" Danny looked worse. He was 21, but he looked 40. The drugs had hollowed him out, leaving a ghost where her little brother used to be. He was asleep when she entered, his breathing shallow. Aria sat by his bed for an hour, holding his thin hand. This was why she endured the double shifts. This was why she had wiped tables until her back screamed. And now, because of Salvatore Romano, she had no job to come back to. The 10,000 bought time. It didn't buy a future. She walked out into the cool night air and pulled out the cream-colored card. Tomorrow. It was already 20 a.m. Technically, it was tomorrow. She dialed the number. It rang once. "Bennett," a voice answered. It wasn't Salvatore, it was deep, gravelly. "We know who you are. A car is 2 minutes away. Wait at the curb." We know where you are." The line went dead. 2 minutes later, a black Lincoln Navigator rolled up silently. The back window rolled down. It was the guard from the restaurant, the one who had almost drawn on her. He nodded toward the door. Aria got in. She had nothing to lose but the debt that would eventually crush her. The drive was long, taking them out of the suburbs and into the industrial heart of the city near the shipping yards. They pulled up to a massive warehouse, converted into a sleek, brutalist office complex, Romano Logistics. Inside, it was a fortress. Cameras swept every corner. Men in suits moved with purpose, carrying tablets and files. Aria was led to the top floor, to an office with glass walls overlooking the harbor. Salvatore Romano was standing by the window, staring out at the dark water. He had changed out of his suit into a black cashmere sweater and dark jeans, looking less like a mob boss and more like a tech billionaire, if billionaires carried Glock 19s in their waistbands. He didn't turn around when she entered. "You paid your brother's rehab bill," he said. Aria froze. "How do you know that?" "I know everything, Aria. That's how I stay alive. I know your rent is late. I know your father walked out when you were 10. I know you dropped out of nursing school to pay for Danny's first detox." Aria felt a surge of anger hot enough to melt steel. "You have no right to investigate me." Salvatore turned then. His face was weary, the lines around his eyes deeper than they had appeared in the restaurant. I have every right to know who saved my life and who I'm about to hire. You fired me, she reminded him. I fired you from Giovanni's because the Volkovs saw your face. If you went back there, they would grab you, torture you to find out what you know about me, which is nothing, and then kill you. I fired you to save your life. He walked over to his massive mahogany desk and leaned against it, crossing his arms. But now you have a problem. You have no income. And Danny's treatment isn't cheap. I can find another job. No, you can't. I've blacklisted you. Aria stepped forward, her hands balled into fists. You did what? No restaurant in the city will hire you. I made 3 calls. You are untouchable. You arrogant, controlling. I need a house manager. Salvatore interrupted, his voice cutting through her rage. My estate on Long Island is a mess. My staff are incompetent or thieves. I need someone who notices details. Someone who doesn't panic when glass starts flying. Someone who isn't afraid to tell me I'm out of wine. Aria stared at him. You want me to be your maid? I want you to run my life outside of this business. Manage the house, the staff, the kitchen, the schedules. You live on the property rent-free. You'll be safe behind my walls. And the pay, and $10,000 a month, plus full medical for you and your brother. Aria's breath hitched. That was more money than she could ever dream of. It would save Danny. It would save her. But it meant selling her soul to the devil. Why me? She asked quietly. You can hire professional estate managers. Salvatore walked up to her, invading her personal space. He smelled of sandalwood and gun oil. He looked down at her, his dark eyes searching hers. Because professional managers steal. Because they are loyal to the paycheck, not the person. You pushed me out of the way of a bullet before you even knew you were doing it. You have instincts, Aria. I can't buy instincts. He extended a hand. Take the job, or walk out the door and try to find work in a city where I own the pavement. Aria looked at his hand. It was a rough hand, a killer's hand. But it was also the hand that had pressed a silk handkerchief to her cheek. She took it. I want Sundays off, she said. Salvatore gripped her hand. His skin was electric against hers. Deal, pack your bags. You move in tonight. The Romano estate, known simply as the Citadel by the locals, was a sprawling stone mansion set on 50 acres of private woodland on the north shore. High walls topped with censers surrounded the perimeter. It was beautiful, cold, and imposing. Aria arrived with 2 suitcases containing her entire life. She was met by Ars Carmina, Salvatore's consigliere. Carmen was a man in his 60s, dressed in a tweed suit, looking like a kindly grandfather, though Aria knew he had probably ordered more hits than she had served hot dinners. Miss Bennet, Carmen said, his voice raspy. Don Salvatore has given you the East Wing suite. It was his mother's room. He has never let anyone stay there. Aria blinked. I can take the staff quarters. You are not exactly staff, Carmen said, leading her through the marble foyer. You are a personal appointment. Do not insult him by refusing. The house was magnificent but sterile. It felt like a museum, not a home. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, but the furniture looked like it hadn't been sat on in years. Your duties, Carmen recited as they walked. Manage the cleaning crew. We use an outside service, but you must supervise them to ensure no listening devices are planted. Stock the kitchen. Manage the Doan's wardrobe. Coordinate with his security detail regarding guests. And keep him alive. Keep him alive, Aria asked, dragging her suitcase up the grand staircase. The Don does not sleep. He forgets to eat. He works until he collapses. He is a machine. Your job is to remind him he is a man. The first week was a blur of logistics. Aria wasn't just a housekeeper. She was a general. She fired the cleaning crew on day 2 after catching one of them photographing Salvatore's mail. She hired a new team vetted by Carmen. She reorganized the pantry, threw out the expired food, which was everything, and restocked the wine cellar with actual Barolo, not the cheap stuff the previous manager had been billing Salvatore for. She barely saw Salvatore. He left before dawn and returned long after she was asleep. It was like living with a ghost. Until Friday, it was 3 a.m. Arya woke up thirsty. She pulled on a silk robe, a perk of the job, found in the wardrobe, and went down to the kitchen. The lights were off, but the refrigerator cast a blue glow across the room. Sitting at the island was Salvatore. He was still in his suit pants and dress shirt, but the shirt was unbuttoned, his tie on the floor. He had a glass of whiskey in one hand and his head in the other. He looked devastated. Arya hesitated in the doorway. "Mr. Romano?" Salvatore's head snapped up. His hand went to his waistband instantly before he realized who it was. He relaxed, but the tension in his shoulders remained. "Arya, go back to bed. You're bleeding," she said. She walked closer. There was a dark stain spreading on the white sleeve of his shirt. "It's a graze. Just a scratch." "Let me see." "I said go to bed." Arya ignored him. She walked to the sink, dampened a clean towel, and grabbed the first aid kit she had organized under the counter. She walked up to him and pushed his hand away from the whiskey glass. "Jacket off. Shirt up." Salvatore stared at her. The defiance in her eyes was the only thing in the house that seemed real to him. Slowly, he peeled off the shirt. Arya sucked in a breath. His torso was a map of violence. Scars, knife wounds, bullet holes, burns crisscrossed his olive skin. But there was a fresh, angry gash on his upper arm, still oozing blood. "Who stitched this?" she asked, examining the sloppy work. "I did. In the car." "You're terrible at sewing," she muttered. "Sit still." She cleaned the wound with efficient, gentle movements. Salvatore watched her face. She wasn't wincing. She wasn't crying. She was focused. "Why aren't you asking what happened?" he asked, his voice rough. "Because if I know, I become a liability," she said, applying antiseptic. "And I like this job. The dental plan is excellent." Salvatore chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "You are a strange woman, Arya Bennett. And you are a messy man, Salvatore Romano." She bandaged the arm and stepped back. "Do you want food, real food? Not liquid dinner?" Salvatore looked at the whiskey, then at her. "I haven't eaten since breakfast." 20 minutes later, they were sitting at the kitchen island eating carbonara. Simple, hot, salty. Salvatore ate like a starving man. "My mother used to make this," he said quietly, twirling the pasta. "It's a classic recipe," Arya said. "No cream. Just egg yolks and cheese." "It's good." He looked at her. "Thank you. Don't get used to it. I'm the manager, not the chef." "Why didn't you run?" he asked suddenly. "That night at the restaurant. Or when I offered you the job. You know what I am. I am a monster, Arya. I kill people who get in my way." Arya looked down at her fork. "My brother Danny, when he was 16, he got jumped by 3 guys on our way home from school. They wanted his sneakers. I didn't run then either. I hit one of them with a brick." Salvatore raised an eyebrow. "We all do what we have to do to survive." Arya continued. "You built an empire to survive. I clean it to survive. We aren't that different." Salvatore reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt very thin, very hot. "We are very different," he whispered. "I destroy things. You fix them." For a moment, Arya thought he was going to kiss her. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She wanted him to, God help her. She wanted the monster to kiss her, but then the security panel on the wall beeped. A red light flashed. Perimeter breach. South gate. Salvatore's expression instantly hardened into granite. The vulnerability vanished. He was the Don again. He stood up, grabbing his gun from the counter. "Go to your room," he ordered, his voice ice cold. "Lock the door. Do not come out until I come for you." "Salvatore, go." Arya ran. She sprinted up the stairs, her bare feet slapping against the cold marble. She made it to the east wing, threw the bolt on her heavy oak door, and backed away. Outside, the night erupted. Automatic gunfire shattered the silence of the estate. Arya stood in the dark, trembling. But she didn't hide under the bed. She went to the window and peered through the blinds. Below, on the lawn, shadows were moving. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. She saw Salvatore moving with that terrifying grace, taking cover behind a fountain, firing back. But then she saw something else. Behind the chaos, near the garage entrance, a figure was moving. It wasn't an intruder. It was wearing the uniform of the Romano security team, but he wasn't firing at the invaders. He was planting something on the underside of Salvatore's armored SUV, a bomb. It was Franco, the head of security, the man who had sneered at her when she arrived. The attack was a distraction. The real hit was coming from inside. Aria didn't think. She grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the bedside table, unlocked her door, and ran back into the hallway. She wasn't safe behind the door, and if she didn't do something, Salvatore was a dead man. She knew the service corridors. She knew the shortcuts. While the gunfight raged on the front lawn, Aria Bennett ran toward the garage, straight into the heart of the betrayal. The garage was a cavernous concrete space smelling of cold oil and expensive rubber. The automatic lights flickered on as Aria burst through the service door, her chest heaving, the brass lamp gripped tightly in her sweating palm. It was quiet here, the gunfire outside muffled by the thick walls. Underneath the massive chassis of Salvatore's armored black SUV, a pair of legs was sticking out. "Franco!" Aria screamed, her voice echoing off the concrete. The legs scrambled. Franco slid out from under the car, a mechanic's creeper rolling with a squeak. In his hand, he held a detonator. Wired to the undercarriage was a brick of C4 plastic explosive, blinking with a small red light. He looked at Aria, his eyes wide with panic that quickly curdled into a sneer. He reached for his holster, but he was awkward on the ground. "Stupid girl," Franco spat. "You should have stayed in your room." Aria didn't wait for him to draw. She wasn't a fighter, but she was desperate. She hurled the heavy brass lamp with all her strength. It wasn't an elegant throw, but it was effective. The heavy base smashed into Franco's shoulder, shattering the bone. Franco howled, dropping the detonator. He scrambled to his feet, clutching his arm, his face twisted in rage. With his good hand, he fumbled for his gun. "I'm going to kill you slowly for that," he hissed, raising the weapon. Aria dove behind a stack of winter tires just as the first shot rang out. The bullet ricocheted off the concrete floor, sending dust stinging into her eyes. She covered her head, waiting for the end. She could hear Franco's heavy boots crunching on the floor, getting closer. Crunch. "Come out, Aria, don't make me hunt." Aria looked around. She had a tire iron within reach. It was pathetic against a gun, but she grabbed it anyway. She wouldn't die on her knees. Suddenly, the service door behind Franco hissed open. Franco spun around, raising his gun, but he was too slow. Salvatore stood in the doorway. He was drenched in rain, his white shirt now stained red, his gun leveled with unwavering precision. He took in the scene instantly. The bomb under the car, Aria cowering behind the tires. Franco with his weapon raised. "Drop it, Franco," Salvatore said. His voice wasn't loud, it was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. "Sal," Franco stammered, sweat pouring down his face. "Sal, listen. The Volkovs, they have my sister. They said if I didn't. You put a bomb on my car," Salvatore said, stepping forward. "You let a hit squad onto my property. You endangered her." He gestured to Aria. "She's just the help," Franco screamed, desperate now. "I've been with you for 10 years. She's been here a week." She ran toward the danger, Salvatore said, his eyes dead. "You are the danger." Bang. A single shot. Franco crumpled to the floor. The silence that followed was heavy. Salvatore didn't look at the body. He walked over to the SUV, peered underneath, and ripped the wires from the C4 with a sharp tug, disabling the detonator. Only then did he turn to the stack of tires. "Aria." She stood up slowly, the tire iron clattering from her shaking hands. Her legs gave out, and she slid down the wall. Salvatore was there in an instant. He dropped his gun and fell to his knees, grabbing her shoulders. His hands were covered in grime and blood, but his grip was solid, grounding her. "Did he hurt you?" he demanded, scanning her frantically. "Did he touch you?" "I hit him with a lamp," Aria whispered, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in her throat. "I broke your lamp." Salvatore stared at her, and then he pulled her into his chest. It was a crushing embrace. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, trying to wash away the smell of cordite and betrayal. "You saved me," he murmured into her hair. Again. "Hay was going to blow you up when you tried to escape." She stammered against his wet shirt. "I know." Salvatore pulled back, his hands cupping her face. The adrenaline was fading, leaving something raw and undeniable between them. "You are not safe here, Aria. I have to get you out. I have to send you away." "No," Aria said, grabbing his wrists. The fear was gone, replaced by a fierce clarity. "If you send me away, they'll find me. They know my face. The only safe place is with you." Salvatore looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she was right. But more than that, he realized he didn't want her to leave. He needed her, not just to run his house, but to anchor his soul. "Then you stay," he swore, "and I will burn the city to the ground before I let anyone touch you again." The next morning, the Romano estate was a hive of activity. Cleaners were scrubbing blood from the driveway. Contractors were repairing the gate. In the main dining room, Salvatore sat at the head of the long table. Carmen was to his right. 3 other capos of the Romano crime family sat in grim silence, and Aria stood by the sideboard pouring espresso. Technically, she shouldn't have been there. This was family business. But when one of the capos had tried to dismiss her, Salvatore had slammed his hand on the table and said, "She stays. She has more courage than Franco did, and Franco was family." So Aria stayed. She listened. "The Volkovs are claiming the attack was a rogue operation," Carmen said, reading from a tablet. "They are denying involvement. They want a truce. A sit-down." "It's a trap," said Enzo, a scarred man who ran the downtown unions. "They want to finish what they started." "Of course it's a trap," Salvatore said, rubbing his temples. "But if I don't go, I look weak. If I look weak, the triads and the cartels will start eating into our territory. I have to go." "Where is the meeting?" Aria asked. The room went silent. The men looked at the waitress. "The gala," Carmen answered, after a nod from Salvatore. "The charity ball at the Metropolitan Museum tonight. Neutral ground, high security, no weapons allowed inside, public eyes everywhere." "That's why it's perfect for them," Aria said, stepping forward. "They won't shoot you. They'll poison you, or they'll isolate you in a private room and use a blade. They need to make it look like an accident to avoid a police crackdown." Salvatore watched her intrigued. "Go on. The Volkovs are arrogant." Aria continued, her mind racing. "I saw them at the restaurant. They don't look at the staff. To them, servers are ghosts, just like you didn't look at me that first night." Salvatore went slightly still at the memory. "I learned my lesson," he said. "They haven't," Aria replied. "If you go in with your usual security, they'll be watching your men. They'll separate you. But if you have eyes on the inside, someone they don't suspect, someone pouring their champagne, you'll have the advantage." "No," Salvatore said immediately. "Absolutely not. You are not working the gala. I can get hired by the catering company in an hour," Aria argued. "I know the agency they use. I still have my uniform. I can be in the room, Salvatore. I can listen to what they say in Russian when they think no one is listening. I picked up enough phrases from the old dishwashers at Giovanni's to understand the basics." "It is too dangerous," Salvatore growled. "More dangerous than sitting here waiting for the next bum," Aria countered. She walked to the end of the table, placing her hands on the wood, leaning toward him. "You need an edge, I am your edge." The room held its breath. Nobody spoke to the Don like that. Salvatore stared at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. He saw the same woman who had pushed him out of the way of a bullet. She wasn't asking for permission. She was offering a strategy. "Carmen," Salvatore said, never breaking eye contact with Aria. "Get her a wire, an earpiece. The smallest one we have, boss," Carmen asked, shocked. "She's right?" Salvatore stood up. "They won't look at her. They'll be too busy looking at me." He walked over to Aria, stopping inches from her. He reached out and adjusted the collar of her blouse, his knuckles grazing her neck. "If you sense anything, anything at all, you get out. You run. You don't try to save me. Do you understand?" "I can't promise that," Aria whispered. Salvatore's eyes dropped to her lips. For a second, the room full of gangsters disappeared. "Tonight," he said low. "Why end this?" The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed. The Temple of Denda was glowing with soft purple light, surrounded by tables draped in white linen and billionaires dripping in diamonds. Aria was invisible. dressed in a black vest and white shirt, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She moved through the crowd with a tray of champagne flutes. She looked like every other server, efficient, silent, subservient, but in her left ear was a microscopic bead connecting her directly to Salvatore's security team, and to Salvatore himself. She saw him enter. He was breathtaking. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, flanked by Carmen and Enzo. He moved through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling that shark-like smile. But his eyes were scanning, always scanning. "I'm in position," Aria whispered into the tiny microphone pinned to her collar. "North side, near the bar. Copy." Salvatore's voice came through her ear, clear and calm. "Volkov is at table 4, the one near the Egyptian sandstone." Aria made her way toward table 4. Dmitry Volkov, the patriarch, was a massive man with a white beard and a laugh that sounded like a rock crusher. He was surrounded by his sons, the same men who had shot up the restaurant. Aria felt a chill run down her spine. She approached the table, keeping her head down. "Champagne, sir." "Leave the bottle." Dmitry grunted, not looking at her. He was speaking in rapid-fire Russian to his son, Alexei. Aria placed the bottle down and fumbled with the napkin, lingering for a few precious seconds. She listened. She caught the words elevator, 10 minutes, no cameras. She heard roof and drop. She walked away quickly, her heart pounding. She found a quiet corner and pressed the transmit button. "Salvatore," she hissed. "They aren't planning to hit you at the table. They're trying to lure you to the roof." Something about the elevator being rigged. There was a pause. "Understood. Stay clear, Aria. I'm going to make contact." She watched as Salvatore approached the Volkov table. Dmitry stood up, arms wide. Feigning friendship, they embraced. It was a sickening display. "Salvatore, my friend," Dmitry boomed in English. "We must talk privately. Too much noise here. Come. I have reserved the terrace lounge. The view is spectacular." The terrace lounge. On the roof. Salvatore smiled. "After you, Dmitry." They moved toward the elevators. Aria's blood ran cold. Salvatore was walking into the trap knowingly. He had a plan. He always had a plan. But as the elevator doors closed, Aria saw something that made her stop breathing. One of the catering staff, a tall man she didn't recognize from the agency, slipped a jamming device out of his pocket and placed it on the security panel near the stairs. Her earpiece went to static. "Salvatore, Carmen," nothing but white noise. The jammer blocked the signal. It also blocked the elevator's emergency stop. They weren't going to the roof to talk. They were going to drop the elevator, or gas it, or seal it off and slaughter him. Aria looked around. The security guards were distracted by a staged fight on the other side of the room. She was alone. She looked at the jammer. Then she looked at the fire alarm on the wall. It was time to cause a scene. Aria didn't pull the fire alarm. A fire alarm was a blunt instrument. It would trigger a chaotic stampede of 1,000 wealthy donors, clogging the exits and potentially allow the Volkovs to slip away in the confusion. No, this situation required a scalpel. Or, as Aria spotted the pitcher of ice water on the bizzing station next to her, a sledgehammer. The jamming device on the wall blinked to steady, mocking red. Her earpiece was dead, somewhere in the shaft of the museum. Salvatore was trapped in a steel box with 3 men who intended to butcher him. She scanned the room, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her eyes landed on the service panel, discreetly hidden behind a fox Egyptian tapestry, near the kitchen entrance. It was the master breaker for the East Wing. She had seen a maintenance worker fiddle with it earlier, when the dimmer switch on the chandeliers malfunctioned. Aria grabbed a heavy steak knife from a passing tray, ignoring the gasp of the busboy, and sprinted toward the panel. She slashed the tapestry aside, revealing the grey metal box. It was locked. "Come on," she hissed, jamming the tip of the knife into the keyhole. She twisted with desperate, white-knuckled force. The metal groaned, the tip bent, but the cheap lock popped with a satisfying snap. She threw the door open. Inside was a bewildering maze of switches and fuses. There was no time to read the labels. There was no time to find the specific circuit for the elevators. She grabbed the pitcher of ice water. "Forgive me, Mr. Edison," she muttered. She threw the entire contents, ice cubes and all, directly into the live fuse box. Crack, zap. The sound was like a gunshot. A massive blue, white arc of electricity exploded from the wall, forcing Arya to recoil, shielding her eyes. The smell of ozone and burning plastic instantly filled the air. The result was immediate and catastrophic. The soft ambient purple lighting of the Temple of Dender died instantly, plunging the massive hall into darkness. The soothing string quartet screeched to a halt. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by confused murmuring from the elite. Above the din, Arya heard the sound she was praying for, the sickening mechanical groan of the elevator brakes engaging violently. Emergency lights flickered on a second later, bathing the museum in a wash of blood, red warning light. Arya didn't wait to see the chaos she had caused. She hitched up her black skirt and ran. She burst into the service stairwell, taking the steps 2 at a time. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but her mind was a singular focused point. Second floor. Get to the second floor. If the elevator had stopped between floors when the power cut, the manual release on the landing above would be the only way out. She reached the second floor landing. It was deserted, the security guard having likely run downstairs to investigate the blackout. Arya threw herself at the elevator doors. She found the emergency keyhole at the top, a triangle shape. She didn't have the key. Think, Arya. Think. She jammed the bent steak knife into the seam of the doors and leveraged her body weight against it. Nothing. The hydraulic seal was too strong. Then she heard it, a muffled shout from inside the shaft. A thud. The sound of a struggle. Panic gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. She spotted the emergency override lever encased in a glass box on the wall, the fireman's key. She smashed the glass with her elbow, ignoring the slice of pain that shot up her arm, and yanked the red lever down. The hydraulic pressure released with a hiss. Arya dug her fingers into the rubber seal of the doors and pulled. Slowly, agonizingly, they parted. The elevator car wasn't level. It was stuck about 4 feet below the landing. The scene inside was a nightmare, bathed in the red glow of the emergency strip lighting. Salvatore was cornered. Dmitry Volkov, a massive bear of a man, had lunged with a ceramic knife, a weapon that had bypassed the metal detectors. Salvatore had blocked the strike with his forearm, his tuxedo jacket shredded, blood dripping onto his white shirt. Dmitry's 2 sons were trying to pin Salvatore's legs, kicking and striking. It was a losing battle. Salvatore was a lethal fighter, but in a 5-by-5 box against 3 men, the math was fatal. Salvatore! Arya screamed, her voice echoing down the shaft. The sound of her voice shattered the claustrophobic focus of the fight. Dmitry looked up, distracted for a fraction of a second. That was all Salvatore needed. He didn't look at Arya. He used the distraction to drive his knee into Dmitry's groin with sickening force. As the older man doubled over, Salvatore grabbed the back of Alexei Volkov's head and slammed it into the mirrored wall of the elevator. The glass shattered. "Climb!" Arya yelled, reaching her hand down into the open shaft. Salvatore looked up. His face was a mask of fury and blood. He vaulted off the railing, grabbing the ledge of the second-floor landing. One of the sons, realizing their prey was escaping, lunged for Salvatore's legs. He grabbed Salvatore's ankle, his nails digging in, trying to drag him back down into the pit. Salvatore slipped, his grip on the carpeted floor failing. Arya threw herself onto the floor. She grabbed Salvatore's wrist with both hands, locking her fingers. She dug her heels into the floor, gritting her teeth. She wasn't strong enough to lift a 200-pound man, but she could be the anchor. Arya shrieked. Salvatore roared, twisting his body and driving his free heel down into the face of the man holding him. The grip broke. With a final desperate heave, Salvatore hauled himself up over the ledge, rolling onto the landing next to Arya. He was gasping for air, his chest heaving, his knuckles raw. Below them, Dmitry was recovering, shouting orders in Russian. He began to boost one of his sons up toward the open doors. Salvatore scrambled to his knees. He didn't run. He looked at the manual override lever Arya had pulled. He slammed it back up. The elevator doors hissed. The son, whose fingers were just reaching the threshold, snatched his hands back with a yelp as the heavy steel doors slammed shut, sealing the tomb. "Lock it!" Salvatore commanded, his voice a ragged growl. Arya scrambled up. She took the steak knife, her talisman of the night, and jammed it violently into the latch mechanism of the outer door, breaking the handle off. It wouldn't hold forever, but it would hold long enough for security to arrive. Silence descended on the hallway, heavy and thick. The only sound was their synchronized, ragged breathing. Salvatore slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. He wiped blood from a cut above his eyebrow, smearing it across his cheek. He looked at Arya. She was a wreck. Her hair had come loose from its severe bun, framing her face in wild tendrils. Her uniform was stained with grease from the elevator door. She was shaking, the adrenaline crash beginning to set in. "You threw water on the fuse box," Salvatore said. It wasn't a question. A small, incredulous smile tugged at the corner of his bloody mouth. "I didn't know which switch was for the elevator," she whispered, staring at her trembling hands. "I improvised." Salvatore began to laugh. It was a dark, rich sound that seemed to bubble up from his chest. He reached out a hand. Arya took it. He pulled her down until she was sitting on the floor beside him, amidst the shattered glass and the flashing red lights. He didn't let go of her hand. "You are absolutely terrifying," he murmured, bringing her knuckles to his lips. "I was just serving the guests," she said, a hysterical giggle escaping her throat. "You saved my life." Again, Salvatore's expression sobered. The intensity in his eyes pinned her to the spot. "I told you to run. I told you if you sensed danger to leave me." "I don't take orders very well," Arya replied, holding his gaze. "You should know that by now. I didn't save the boss. I saved you." The distinction hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Salvatore reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. "Carmine," he said, his voice instantly shifting back to cold command. "Second floor, east wing. The elevator is disabled. The Volkovs are inside. They have weapons, and thanks to the jammer they installed, we have logs of their intent to commit murder. Call the commissioner. I want them arrested, not killed. Arrested. Let them rot in a cell knowing they were beaten by a waitress." He hung up and looked back at Arya. "Ready to go home?" "My shift isn't over," she joked weakly. "It is now. You're retired." They walked out of the service exit into the cool, damp New York night just as the sirens began to wail in the distance. The flashing blue lights of the police cars bounced off the wet pavement, painting the city in a chaotic beauty. A black SUV screeched to the curb. Carmen jumped out, flanked by 4 guards. He looked at Salvatore's torn suit and bloodied face, then at Arya. He nodded once, a gesture of profound respect. Salvatore opened the rear door, but he didn't get in immediately. He turned to Arya. "The job is done," he said softly. "The Volkovs are finished. The threat is gone. You are free, Arya. You can take the money. You can go back to school. You can leave the estate. You can have a normal life." Arya looked at the open car door. She looked at the city skyline, the world she used to inhabit, a world of overdue bills, fear, and invisibility. Then she looked at the man standing before her, a monster to some, a savior to others. A man who commanded the world and won, but who needed someone to watch the shadows he couldn't see. She realized she didn't want a normal life. She wanted this life. She wanted the fight. "I can't go back," she said, stepping closer to him. "I know too much. I've seen too much." "Is that the only reason?" Salvatore asked, his voice low. "No," Arya admitted. "I don't want to leave, but I'm done being the house manager. I'm done with the housekeeping. I'm done with the uniform." Salvatore smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes completely. It wasn't the smile of a predator. It was the smile of a man who had finally found his equal. "Then what do you want?" he asked. "A partner," Arya said. "I want to be at the table, not serving it, sitting at it." Salvatore Romano, the man who bowed to no one, stepped aside and gestured to the interior of the car. "After you," he said. Arya Miller slid into the leather seat. As Salvatore climbed in beside her and the heavy door slammed shut, shielding them from the noise of the city, she knew one thing for certain. Table 9 was no longer the vault, it was the throne, and she had just taken her seat. And that is the story of Arya Bennett, the waitress who refused to be just another piece of furniture in a dangerous man's world. She proved that loyalty isn't bought, it's forged in fire. And sometimes the most powerful move you can make isn't pulling a trigger, but knowing exactly when to throw a pitcher of ice water. Salvatore Romano thought he was hiring a housekeeper. He ended up with a queen. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button. It seriously helps the channel and lets me know you want more stories like this one. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.